Hello guys, and welcome to this VOLKSWIZARD video, which is a very special video for two reasons. Firstly, because it's the first one filmed on my new local patch of Warwickshire, which, as you can see, is pretty beautiful and has got some amazing roads. But the real reason it's special is the car. This may look like a normal Audi RS6, but rest assured it's not. This is an Audi RS6 Plus. Now, just 999 of these were made, 100 or so came to the UK. This one's from Audi's heritage fleet, so I'm very lucky to have it for the weekend, but I'm also very lucky they like to see these cars demonstrated in videos like this. So stick around, hopefully you'll find out some interesting facts about this very, very exclusive car, and you'll see how it performs in the real world today. Now let's kick this video off by having a look around it and picking out the little changes over the standard model that make the RS6 Plus special. Okay, let's start on the outside then. So from the front, the first thing you notice is that we have a much more menacing look because all the matte aluminium around the grills has become black, and that continues to the roof rails and the window surrounds and this little trim at the bottom of the tailgate, which is normally silver on every other A6, S6, RS6. In black, it just looks so different, so cool. The exhaust tips are black. That's not the only change to the exhaust. We'll come to the other changes later on. We have got grey wheels as well. This was standard for the Plus. Obviously lots of people have had their wheels refurbished in grey. It was quite a different look back in 2004, but it's much more common now. Another Plus difference is that we have cross-drilled brake discs. These are 365mm at the front, 335 at the back, and they're floating discs as well, so they kind of can handle heat a lot better because they can expand into this gap down here rather than warping, which is what a one-piece disc would do, and these brakes will get very hot indeed. Still got the alloy mirror covers, which were an S6 RS6 trademark. Still metal on this car, but they changed to plastic not long afterwards. We've got a solar powered sunroof, which is quite unusual. This runs the air conditioning when the engine's off on a hot day. Now the colour, to my eyes, looks a bit too new for the car. This is sprint blue, so probably more often seen on like the 2007 onwards Audi S3. I think it probably just got into the colour palettes just as this car was being produced, and I think Audi probably paid a lot more money to have it on this car. And it looks incredible. Other common colours for this car are red and black, and they both look good, to be perfectly honest. Inside, I believe these seats weren't standard for the Plus. These are black leather with Alcantara, sort of creamy Alcantara centre. They're made by Recaro. They're a very actually common seat at the time, and one of the common traits of them is they actually don't go very low, so that's as low as they go. It's got this big bulky probably motor down there, but they are electric. But even in such a big car, I feel like I'm perched quite high when I'm in it. We've got RS6 sill covers, but nothing special there. Now, one thing this car should have, according to the press reports, and it was in the other press car, there was a red one that was doing the rounds a bit earlier than this one. There should be a plaque down here with the unique number of the car, but that's missing. I'll just turn the engine on because it's a bit chilly today. We've got this lovely carbon fibre. It's very deep and glossy. It's even got bits of blue in it that matches the paintwork. I'm not sure if that's just a coincidence. An interesting little thing on this car is that it's got the later RNSE navigation system. Most of the RS6s have got an even clunkier system than this. So this is quite modern for its day, and it was used for another 10 years or so. Even if you bought a 2015 Mark 1 R8, you'd get a very similar nav unit to this one. Got Bose sound, which was standard. You can probably see the carbon fibre in the door there in the sun a lot better. I'm a big fan of Alcantara headlinings. They're always normally a very expensive option, but they're not. They're standard on this car. The sunroof, interestingly, because it's got solar panels in it, you can't open the blind and have just light coming in without opening it. You have to either open it or tilt it, which is a bit of a shame really. I think even if you haven't got the solar panel roof, you still don't get a glass panel there that you can use without opening. But in many ways it's very similar to the normal car, which in itself is very similar to the normal A6. We've got a perforated steering wheel rim, which is a nice touch. It's a perfectly round steering wheel as well, which was, I suppose, on borrowed times, because not long after this we started to get the flat bottom wheels. no buttons on here at all. I drove this car in the dark yesterday and I was stabbing at buttons that weren't there, thinking they weren't illuminated, and then I was like, oh, it hasn't got any buttons. That's so unusual today. Got paddle shifters there, which again 15 years ago were quite unusual, and they're connected to a 5-speed Tiptronic gearbox. You can select manual mode here, although it's not particularly manual, as we'll find out when we go driving. Got dual climate control, all this lovely quality switch gear, heated seats which are pretty handy today. You can turn the traction control off if you so desire. The speedometer and rev cans look pretty similar to a lot of other models. I think the typeface is slightly different on RS's. Got the RS badge there. Probably the best bit though is the 200 mile an hour thing there. It's a little bit optimistic on this car. I think it's somewhere in the 170s, which isn't to be sniffed at. And on that note, I think it's a good time now to go and drive this Audi RS6 Plus on these amazing Warwickshire roads. Actually, before we go for a drive, let's have a look under the RS6's bonnet. It's just like a normal RS6 under here, but it's still very impressive nonetheless, not least because you're greeted with this sea of carbon fibre. This is actually functional as well. These are the air filter boxes, and they filter the air that comes in through these huge intake pipes, and then it all goes down to the twin turbos at the back of the engine. It's a V8 is hidden under all that carbon fibre, so imagine 2 banks of 4 cylinders just like that. The standard RS6 produces 450 horsepower and this one produces 480, and the beauty of it all is that it's made in England. Yep, this sort of classic German car has an English heart, and that came about because at the time Volkswagen Group owned Cosworth Technologies. You've probably heard of them, famous for their Ford engines. Well, they gave them the normal sort of not particularly exciting V8 from Audi, and they told them to strap a couple of turbos to it and make it breathe, and that's what they did, and that's why we have this truly exceptional engine in this car today. And it's no different today actually with Mercedes Formula One, because their engines are made over in Brixworth, which is very close to Wellingborough where this engine was made, and obviously Mercedes are a very German company. Now if that hasn't whetted your appetite for seeing how this RS6 drives, I don't know what will. So without any further ado, let's go and drive this rather crazy estate car on these rather lovely Warwickshire roads. Okay guys, well here we are behind the wheel of the Audi RS6 Plus, and it's just started raining, but I'm not scared because we have Quattro all-wheel drive to dispense that 480 horsepower to this wet December tarmac. Now this was the first generation of RS6, but it's called the C5 because it's based on the 5th generation of C-segment larger estate sort of saloon car that Audi manufactured, and it was a pretty good first attempt at a very fast estate car. But we have to remember this car wasn't designed for a British B road like this. It was designed for going up and down the autobahns with a German businessman behind the wheel, probably with a moustache like that, probably called Jürgen, and for him it was a dream come true because he would nip up and down the motorway between Würzburg and Frankfurt all day long, and it was a very restful place to be. He had total control over the outside lane because everybody would move out of his way. There wasn't really much that would go faster. It would beat contemporary Porsches quite easily, apart from maybe a turbo. So yeah, it was an amazing car for its target audience in Germany, but it was slightly out of its depth here in the UK. And you can't blame them, because how did they know it would sell so well in the UK? We really bought it because of its prestige. You know, it was the top dog in so many ways, but its performance was just too much for these roads, particularly with a chassis that was very strangely comfort orientated. Both models, Standard and Plus, have got DRC, which is hydraulically linked dampers, which reduce float and pitch when you go on the brakes, and they do work pretty well. But even this Plus model, which has got uprated suspension, feels a little bit strangely underdamped on a road like this, even though it sort of feels firm at the same time. It's It's slightly peculiar, but it is a lot better than the original car. I drove one of these on a wet day in the UK and it felt nothing short of dangerous. It was still 450 horsepower, so just 7% less than this car, but the suspension was, yeah, pretty frightening. I think it was in pretty good condition. It was a relatively low mileage car. Well, this Plus, it's 10mm lower, the dampers and the springs are uprated, and you can actually feel it when you get it loaded up. It does feel a lot more precise, although it's still a big car. The biggest handicap to enjoying this car on a road like this though is the steering, which never really feels any different regardless of loading. It feels pretty vague most of the time, which is a shame because this car's clearly got a lot of mechanical grip. The only way I've been able to get my head around it is to just chuck it around on a big roundabout in the wet and feel where the grip levels are, and then sort of imprint that in my brain and use that every time I drive the car, so I drive up to the limits that are there. A good driver's car will let you read the grip levels instantaneously and you just respond to them accordingly. But yeah, that's probably the biggest handicap to enjoying this car fully. The Plus improvements in the chassis are definitely notable and obvious, but yeah, steering still feels a bit vague. Now onto the engine. This engine though is absolutely incredible. I don't think things have moved on much with engines. Cosworth did the work on this car and the normal RS6 and actually the original B5 RS4, and you can tell it is nothing short of spectacular. The way things have moved on is with MPG, because this car will sit around 15 to 20, I think, pretty much however you drive it, and that's quite bad really. The fuel tank is 82 litres. It doesn't really seem to go very far. I've driven around Milton Keynes a bit. I've driven to work just outside Birmingham. I've driven back to Warwickshire and we're already on 3/4 of the tank gone, which is pretty tragic. So we've got a twin turbo V8, 4.2 litre. The 4.2 litre V8 had been around in Audi for quite a long time, but the work Cosworth did totally transformed it. Oh God. We've also got a low pressure exhaust system in this car, which releases some of that power and a bit more of that lovely, lovely V8 rumble. There's also a little bit of turbo whoosh coming in as well, which I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have allowed on the standard car. It was a little bit too boisterous. So engine wise, it's incredible. Slight negative is that we've got a 5-speed Tiptronic, which even sounds old, doesn't it? You can put it into manual mode down here and use the paddle shifters, which at least it's got, because that was quite a new thing back then. But it will still change up when it gets to the red line. What a thing though, what a thing. Okay, now I think it's a pretty good time to talk about the brakes, because let's face it, they are rather important when you've got 480 horsepower and 2 tons to keep in check. Now when I first drove this car, they felt awful. They just felt really wooden and not very reassuring, and I can only put that down to the fact that this car has had very little use in recent years, because as the day has gone by today and they've had some use stroke abuse, they've actually got very good, as I will demonstrate now. So this is a 50-mile-an-hour road. Just find a little straight bit. The surface is pretty wet, so they're not going to stop me on a sixpence, but I will press the brake now. I think we've just ripped up about a metre of tarmac there. Sorry, Warwickshire County Council. But yeah, that was pretty unpleasant, almost as unpleasant as the forces generated through acceleration in this car. So yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised. They're perfectly good enough for enjoying this kind of car on a B road and allowing for other motorists that might pull out in front of you without any warning. So yeah, that's really surprising. So every B5 RS4 and this shape RS6 I've driven have been very disappointing in that area, but it's probably because normal owners don't give the brakes much of a pounding, and they're designed to have a pounding. So yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, well that's the Audi RS6 Plus done and dusted. I was prepared to dislike this car. I've got to admit, I didn't enjoy RS6s I've driven in the past, and even RS4s are a bit meh. But I don't know, maybe it's because it's low mileage, maybe because it's a plus, but this car was actually really good fun to drive in an environment where it shouldn't be, i.e. round here. Okay, it's not perfect, it does feel a bit disconnected because of the gearbox and the steering is so vague, but it makes up for it in so many other ways. The engine is remarkable. I mean, straight line performance isn't the be all and end all, but that engine is super special, and when you know it's made by Cosworth, you kind of appreciate what they've done to that engine, because it breathes like a V8 shouldn't. Even turbo engines shouldn't breathe like that car. A turbo V8 engine definitely shouldn't breathe like that car. The chassis is alright, you can work with it, it's not bad, it gets itself set up in corners and it kind of feels alright. It's a bit unnerving when you first drive it because it does feel a bit wallowy, but DRC, when it's working as it seems to be in this car, seems to be pretty good. Also, it's uprated over the standard car, so it's a little bit firmer, but it needed it because it was a bit of a wallower as standard. Now, would I buy one? Do you know, I think I would. If I had a collection, I'd definitely go out and looking for a plus. I'd make sure it had the plaque on the centre console, unlike this car though. But for the real world buyer, go and buy a nice standard one, because they are so cheap now. I think they're like £7 the cheapest one on Auto Trader, up to about 15 for the best. And then take it to MRC Tuning in Banbury, which is about 15 miles over there, chuck them a few grand and they'll make your car better than a plus, because they'll probably put KW coilovers on it, they'll remap it, and they'll probably do other little tweaks that will make it even better. And that would be a phenomenal car for what, I don't know, under 15,000 quid, all done, I imagine. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this VOLKSWIZARD video from glorious, rather windswept Warwickshire. If you have, please give it a thumbs up, please comment, please share, please do subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one, when I hope it's a bit warmer very soon.